All right, we are back and into the action here. We apologize for some brief technical difficulties on our stream end. We assure you that it is not our fault and we are great, but we do apologize nonetheless. Uh, Getting right into the action here with a Takao match, with Takao going up against Freely Kali or Freely Kai. I'm not really sure. Again, one of these newer players, but we see again right into the action here with a big Soviet deck against a I believe what I thought was a Soviet air deck, but now I'm seeing quite a few bigger tools and some ramp. What is Free playing up there, Corn?
Well, if you notice, we have Takao as the player, and then we also have Takao's hand um, for Free Lakai. So we
Oh, we
don't
do.
actually
Oh,
know what Free is playing. However,
yeah, we have the same hand up twice. Unfortunately, we'll get that. We'll get that sorted in just a moment here.
we do know that Takao is playing the Saruga OTK list here. Takao perhaps brought the most interesting lists of the event that I have seen so far. Um, and Free Lakai is playing the a US Britain ramp list as we can surmise from the cards on the field right now. So Takao's resources are running out. Takao does have sitting on a uh, sitting on a decent hand here, but no Sarugas to pop the damage yet. But the depths of winter is going to be pretty big here. I would imagine you don't want the Catalina draw to go off. But Takao says, draw three, pick your two favorite, and meet me in the front line right now. That is the claim. And speaking of cards, we can see Freeze hand.
Yeah, bit of a small error, but we have that figured out for you. Yeah, and that's the game sort of developing here into a bit of a tenuous state, and this is game three, so this will be the decider here for this set. The ramp player with plenty of health has got a draw engine going, trying to make this game go a little longer, and of course, Takao trying to hold on here with a big 9-9 in the front line.
Yeah, if you're Takao, you're really, really hoping that Free just goes wide so that you can just get a huge depths of winter here. You don't really want to allow your opponent to draw forever and ever. The strategic error here to take out the draw engine is less than ideal, but it's not bad. Takao is really just trying to get some draw going so that he can complete his OTK shenanigans.
Yeah, really
And
unfortunate that it was a glamour boy. Of course, you could hope try to make a play there where you use strategic defense to kill all the infantry, so that you can then just smash the bomber with your infantry. That would have been really nice, but unfortunately, that glamour boy has too much health to be taken out by that strategic infantry. So you have to kill the plane with it, and like you said, that just feels terrible. But he got some really nice use out of his gigantic elite guard. Uh, Running right into a winter offensive after he got some use out of it, and then right back into another big guard. Could be a lot worse here.
yeah, for just looking at Takao, Takao has zero healing besides what is accrued from the engineer battalion. So Takao's gonna need at least 1 HP for a winter warfare to pop the board.
Yeah, counteroffensive deck, something that we haven't seen in quite a while. You could possibly be very, very familiar if you're a longtime cards player. This was certainly something that was done very early on. Maybe create a big board, uh, even using your opponent's big board against them, possibly, and then able to do 1 damage to the entire board with the Winter Warfare, and then throwing down the counteroffensive, giving +2/+1 to a unit for every injured unit on the board. You can certainly amass an absolutely huge unit instantly for a OTK. Of course, in historical context, a lot that was done with Ura, which was a since rotated card that allowed you
Ooh.
to essentially hit the
If this
HQ from your backline, but that is no
this
longer a
is
part of the game
game
here.
that is unfortunate. You can't really put yourself on 3 HP when you know your opponent has the strategic bombing left in the deck, but what else do you have? Takau's not finding the combo pieces that he needs, but ladies and gentlemen, this is Swiss round, so Takao will live to fight another day. One loss is not the end of the world, although it's not what you want to it's not what you want to brag to your mom about at the end of the day.
And that is all why we play, to brag to our moms. That's a great point. So not like you said, Takau's been around quite a bit now, really immersed themselves in the game, gotten quite good in a very, very reasonable, even short amount of time. So I'm sure it won't be the last we see of them, and maybe not even the last we see of them today as they try to get into tomorrow's big top eight. Let's see here who else we can get for you guys. Just a moment here as we zoom around.
As we pivot, just the people who are the players that are sitting at 2-0, we have HQT, we have Tweeta Cargo, and we have one other player. We have Taboo. So some well-known names here pulling out to an early 2-0 start, but that only means they're going to have to play the best as the tournament, the qualifiers continue. Other games are rolling in. We have a few more options to bring you some action on round two before we hand it over to the second casters who will take us through round three.
Yeah, I believe we are getting into a the end of a Tang Tang round two match here. We'll get that up for you as soon as we can.
Nice, nice. Let's pull up. Looks like the most common decks that have been brought are 3 decks in a more aggressive meta. We have the Brit Soviet Air, the Japan Germany aggro, and the Soviet US self damage. Seem to be the most 3 popular lists people have brought, and
Ooh,
Tang
and
Tang
Tang
is no
Tang
exception.
with a big quit sees the 7 out of 8 damage from the 2 fighter jets. So making a quick work of that. I believe that was not, the decider. That was an early game in this match. So hopefully we will go right back into Tang Tang's match here as soon as they start game two. That was game three. Okay. That was game three. So we're going to find you something even better here. Just a moment.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit less than ideal trying to go just because the meta right now is so aggressive. These
It's
games are
fast.
flying off the shelf like hot potatoes on a July afternoon. Everyone wants to
Peak
get their
potato
games in
season.
quick. Um, so we're doing our best to pivot as fast as possible, but round three will be a little bit better because we'll have the smooth transition, and the entire action will be there for you. So let's see who else is wrapping up their round two matches. While we look for a match, I'm just going to go back to Cal's game. Takao did not bring what was perceived as the meta. Takao did bring like a Brit Germany control, the Suruga OTK that we did not get to see pop off, and the Japan Soviet self credit denial list. So credit to the cow for bringing three decks that are not the meta. And that will probably be something that we'll be monitoring going forward if Takao can um, find a win later on in the tournament.
259 playing a German Soviet deck, it looks like here, and playing into some very interesting Japanese cards here. Not quite sure what to call our bottom player here. I do not believe that we have a name for them quite yet, but they had some really interesting turns.
Is it Nanami?
Oh, okay, Nanami.
I believe Nanami is running just a standard Jagro list. It seems a little confusing with the Catalina that was taken from one of the two Out of the Mists that have been run in this list, or perhaps the On the Ascent.
Is that an Italian side nation though?
Yo.
Is that an exile German card?
Nope, it's just an Italian card.
Am I
I
going crazy? He drew an Italian card. His side nation is Germany.
I clicked the wrong deck list. This is clearly a Japan Italy control. Always has been.
Okay. So of course that T-35 coming from a German Sherman, a Panzergren. It looks like that Panzergren was 1-1, so it appears that that was the on the ascended unit stolen from the German deck, put into the Japan Italian deck, and then giving a German unit and German tank to the Japan Italian deck. It is early. We're getting there.
This
Oh, and a
this deck
big
being
dagger
brought
strikes.
by, yeah, big daggers only. The this deck brought by 259 um is kind of interesting. It definitely looks like it's gonna run out of steam versus this more traditional looking Soviet Italian control list.
Japan's first elite tank has entered the battlefield. Took him a couple years, but we have a Japanese elite tank.
Love to see it.
Hasn't seen too much play yet, but seeing the field now here today, very cool.
The skies are about to be claimed. Unfortunately, the guard will prevent face damage. And this has got to be all but inevitable a formality for I am stuttering over. Hurts Nanami appears to be in position to take this round two duel. With a big scoop, we'll
Big
prepare
surrender
for,
by
for round three.
2-5.
Well,
All right, another
round
big
two is in the
match, and
book.
I believe that we are actually that is going to take us to round three. So, as we sort of get our bearings here a little further, we have so far seen quite a few little surprises. We saw Tang Tang with an unfortunate 0-2 start. Certainly not out of it yet. A lot of Swiss rounds to play. So totally possible they could still sneak in to the top eight. And we have some other players going as well. I believe Takao is 1-1. I believe No and 5 still going. So let's see what we can bring up here
So
for our
if we
first of round three.
pivot back to that player, the 259 player, I want to highlight the that player brought a Soviet Finland control list with, cold traps, White Death Detached Battalion, and Sturmy. Um, that that is a cool list. I have not seen much of it, but when you have a Soviet shell that just wants to play big tanks to enable mechanized, you can experiment with different allies, and why not slap Finland in there, um, and try to get some credit cheating, um, with the uh, 2K order that can remove the operation cost on your big tanks. So yeah, but also the Japan Italy control list. I wonder how that is doing. If that is a countermeasure call, let's try to control the board against this aggro tournament field. Uh, could be a thing. Unfortunately for 259, that Germany Soviet combined arms without combined arms, almost like a Aunt Frida list, synergy, was just not able to pull it out there, and I'm not sure what it would be able to pull a win out against. Maybe that's looking to counter specifically the Brit Air lists.
Yeah, maybe sneaking, or I'm sorry, targeting those, as you said, seeking, not sneaking, seeking those out, trying to make an educated call for what they plan on seeing. We are taking just a moment here to have our players get into their round three matchups, and we will have a fresh game, hopefully right from the beginning for you.
Big round three matchups only. So no and five, like we said, is at a 1-1 versus another 1-1 opponent. So this is for the tournament life here. Um, two losses does not appear to be sufficient, although I could be wrong in my Swiss math brain.
Yeah, we have
Don't want to go down.
21 players today, I believe, vying for 8 spots.
Checks out.
Just waiting on our players here. Just a moment.
Just trying to bring the deck list up on my side to have some analysis.
Yeah, the top five at 2-0. HQT, DeCargo, among some of the more most familiar names there. And then, like we said, we have uh, Free Kai and No and 5, both at 1-1. So the board certainly moving.
So no one five's opponent this round, I believe, is Cherno.
Yeah, Cerno. Not
Cerno.
sure which player he is in Chinese text.
Okay, so Cherno will be bringing the Soviet US self damage, the Japan Germany aggro, and the Brit US ramp, as opposed to no one five with the same lineup except Brit Soviet air instead of the Brit US ramp.
Yeah, of course, No and 5 slamming his Brit Soviet air has been for several months now. He's very confident on the deck, very skilled on the deck. And as basically all of us ladder players know, I'm not much of a ladder player anymore, but even I know it is quite the deck to deal with.
Yeah, and you can see a number 9 commando in no and five's hand here. Pretty standard Brit Air card, especially with the Soviet ally right now. However, this number 9 commando is one of 3 copies in no and five's list, and that commando is a little bit more important in no and five's list because no and five is running 2 Baker Street irregulars, and it would love to develop an additional British order on the condition that it has a commando unit on the board, and it's number 9 commando's job to be that commando unit.
Actually switching out a from the people for a or I'm sorry, a Red Dawn for a from the people, not taking the self damage, just having that from the people ready to go. No and 5, seeing that, make sure that he gets an extra health on his Crusader, on his draw engine right away, so he doesn't have to quite worry about that. But of course, an M10 is going to make sure that not only does it lose its health, but it loses its draw ability as well.
And draw
Sexton
ability.
coming down right on turn 5. Really nice. That 4-2 tank, super mobile. Good to lock that down.
Yeah, Cherno is certainly fighting back, but is spending a lot of HQ in the process. But um, depending on how no and five draws here, that could be the most important part. Convoy draw 3. What do you think we're going to see out of no and 5 here?
Yeah, I mean, I think he really just has to go wide with this board. Throw some of these planes down, really hope to get draw into a Cass. Of course, the 2-1-3s line up super well for that now unpinned 4-2 M10. That's going to be a classic trade for Zero here. And getting the engineers down also bodes super well. Getting a little low on health as he damages himself. But of course, No and 5 has been holding a number 9 commando with a sickle, waiting for the opportunity for what is essentially a target kill with those 2 cards. Very nice, very clean.
Yeah, and when you have that number 9 commando and a bloody sickle in hand, you have so much power, and he to the choice to remove the engineer with it when you know that this deck is predicated on big threats touching the board.
And
Um,
here come some of those big threats. Ooh, a lovely lightning draw. Right when a 34th guards comes out as a discount, no, and 5 draws away to send it back to make them pay not only again, but full price.
and I don't know if you're gonna see it because you need to destroy your Known Five locked himself into a face race scenario with that play, telegraphing, "Hey, I want to um, remove your healing and just have the ability to burst you down, especially with a Wellington already in hand." And this heal tank is a thorn in that side. So we're gonna see No. 5 commit to removing all the healing. Um,
Yeah, it
and
does indeed send that guard back now. 3 big guards in Cyrano's hand.
nice.
Just
Well,
continuing to draw, yeah, just continuing to draw and just manufacture units, pushing them up. Even the Brit Air player getting a little overwhelmed here.
yeah, I mean, No. 5 does have a convoy, can go searching. Um, some big draws here in terms
Yeah,
of
finally finding his
pass.
Casses. Wellington now down to super cheap. He's got the number 9 commandos for his next play. Interesting. Not making the Wellington play this turn.
No, that's fine. Like we said, No. 5 wants to face race and save this Wellington for lethal.
Yep, definitely. But not getting any buffs on it has to hurt a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
These big guards coming down. Too slow, but of course stand together. Make sure that they go from a very slow card to a very fast card as long as you can afford it.
Oh
And
boy,
that,
that's one damage off.
yeah, I was going to say almost wraps it up, but then of course it doesn't.
Oh, you commit this now? That this is your life's work.
I mean, I'm not quite sure. Obviously 5 out of 6. Really rough numbers here for No and 5. And with a Hellcat, that is a very dead Wellington and probably a dead game for No and 5, but I mean, what can you do? Your only other choice here was this exact situation, but them at 1 health, so not really any better.
Yeah, No. 5 only has the No. 5 still has the HMS Illustrious, but at this point, um, you'd have to go convoy into Crusader and to get a huge draw thing, but it's just not looking likely. So
Yes, and
uh,
what was a 2-turn lethal is still a 2-turn lethal, but is now even more secure. Oh,
okay,
sincerely yours. We're gonna buy a little bit of time here. And the
Monty,
Monty, we are back in 2021.
what are you talking about? This game's already over. Don't you
And
don't know in
illustrious.
five? Are you
Hello, we are
familiar
knowing.
with?
We are still knowing 5. We will never stop being knowing 5. Do not worry.
Are you familiar with No. 5's game?
Even Charles Barkley familiar with this game. Oh, wait, that's a Shack line. Excuse me.
All right, let's throw this Baker Street irregular in there. Develop last. Are you sure about that? It just goes wide. Doesn't even need the Baker Street irregulars.
Interesting as
Man,
well, of course, if that Wellington would have gone face, he would have found that one damage, but he would have also left another unit on the board. The
no.
10-10 blitzes to the front line. We are presenting lethals. We need a cast. Royal Research isn't a cast, but it's a synthetic rubber, and
Oh
it's
my
done. It's over. That'll
gosh.
do it. No in 5. Top deck stat
Oh,
is maxed out. Plot armor stat maxed out.
somewhere Jaking is just absolutely
Inspired.
not inspired. Just oh my gosh.
And we
Who
finally get a
who
good game and
who
excellent.
draws like that? That is the top decks that inspire outrage, hope, perhaps a um shonen jump,
Yeah, perhaps a
Yugi
small gambling
Moto,
addiction.
gambling addiction, conspiracy theories.
Yeah, it
You
really can go a lot of ways.
you
What a
can't keep getting
finish.
away with this. What was that then?
That was known 5.
Wow. The almost perfect top decks to daisy train lethal perfectly.
And known 5, of course, an aggressive player, very much known as an aggressive player, just stepping from one aggro race down deck to another, right into a fast Jaggro deck. And as self damage kind of takes a seat back at the table here with all of these, powerful A tier decks, these tournament decks. In an aggressive meta, it can be, hard to play self damage. It certainly makes self damage more of a important choice ridden deck, if you will. Obviously, playing against aggressive go fast decks when you're also doing damage to yourself basically enables them to go even faster. So, a lot to think about and a lot to play against.
Yeah, playing against the self damage list with a what would normally be a really good Jagro hand, but with everything susceptible to this early removal. Um, Interesting how no and five will navigate around it.
And a very classic anti Jaggro play from the uh self damage player, right? We throw down our guard that gets buffed when we do damage to ourselves. And it doesn't become a guard until we do damage to ourselves, right? And then of course the sickle into the 1 health unit, of which Jaggro has many. Really, really nice play for the self damage player. But no and 5 sitting on those suppressions, those are going to be super useful to
S-
make sure that that unit isn't a guard and is no longer receiving all these buffs. And already at 13 health.
This is kind of an awkward turn. You don't know what Cherno has in hand. Cherno doesn't have any removal as we speak, but that M10 suppression on the draw from the recon is going to actually be pretty um, pretty brutal, um, because no one five would love some cards to be had.
And the M10 will take care of that. No one will have to get another 33 recon down and hope to
Ooh,
find some draw there. And he is going full bore, full blast with all of his width. Knocks
going
down a single HP for good measure.
no one
Now, no
five's
and 5
all in
again.
here.
Yeah, at the mercy of the draws, but that has not worked out poorly for him so far.
Hold on for a second. I got it back.
Engineer's going to play a huge role here. We're going to start cracking health in right now. Ooh, even an early stand together. Of course, these usually used with those big guards to create giant tanks, but a suppressed 1/1, not a terrible move.
This is
Pure
not as
tempo
bad
there.
as I thought. The self damage list is not running Winter Warfare, so it's just Bloody Sickles for the pings with Red Dawns.
And we saw in the last match, right, that Cerno is not afraid to go the less conventional route, not afraid to not deal damage to himself with a Red Dawn and just sit on a from the people al natural.
Ooh,
The KI-30 and another new Blood and Iron elite that is definitely making a presence. When
and
Cerno
if
able to just throw these massive, not massive buffs, but knowing right back we talked about the early use of stand together, knowing that you're going to get a zero op cost tank holding a bunch of buffs, that is, that is a good play, an interesting play.
even No 5 is not believing in his own plot armor here, throwing out the emote concession, not surrendering yet, playing the game out, but there is no enigma for No 5 to cheese another victory out from the jaws of defeat.
Yeah, and they even knowing five knows that that wasn't it. That was not a winnable game. Not many outs to play to there. So scoop and go next. We are tied 1-1 in this third round set here.
Yeah, and most likely we're gonna see the Jagro mirror here come out as uh Cherno's other option is Brit Ramp. It's you know not your first choice to face Jagro, to face No 5 Jagro. And No 5 pivots. No 5 reads the Jagro from Cherno and says, "Hey, I got something for your low health units. Have a bloody sickle." What do you think about that read by No 5?
Well, I maybe correct, possibly correct. We'll have to see.
I mean, No 5 just lost this matchup and then says, "Hey, I saw what you did there, and I'm gonna do the same thing to you right now. So have fun."
1-5 saying, Lord, I've seen what you've done for others.
And the Lord in this scenario is his opponent. All right, this is round 3 for the first. To keep your tournament hopes alive in 2025. No 5
And
on the
like we said,
board.
tied. So, yep, on the board, tied 1-1, right? So,
Mhm.
with a first to two no bans. This is the decider here.
The early Aichi from Cherno is definitely paying dividends. It's a threat that No 5 is going to have to answer.
Yeah, certainly difficult. Uh, just now
The
getting
Sayu?
some tools to possibly deal with that.
What? There's a lot of options, and Sayun face was not.
Yeah, both players here
What?
going with some interesting routes.
He could have easily traded that 456th off and prevented it from growing.
Yeah, the lines on both sides here. Maybe getting a little
Cherno
stressful. He is
just
a
locked himself
face
into a face
demon.
race. Wow.
Absolutely.
I guess with that and that and in hand, you're hoping for a huge payoff, but
Just saying, if this is an aggressive meta, then I'm going to play aggressively.
I'm a little flabbergasted at how early the choice was to face race and ignore these units that are growing each turn with guard.
Yeah, perhaps thinking, if these units keep growing, then they can't die, which means that they're not going to lend the health that from Engineer Battalion. Of course, doesn't know that No N5 is sitting on a we can do it, and that 3 health could loom extremely large when Jagger's trying to just absolutely race you and tick you down.
Yeah, and that Aichi does have the destruction effect to be able to add another bomber with smoke screen. So he's basically saying, "You destroy this, I'm coming back at you for 3 more next turn."
Engineers, of course, also doing its due diligence in blocking a big on the ascent play. Always feels good against the Japanese player to have a single 0-4 down on the board, knowing my engineers are good. They're going to sit here. They're going to get me health. And, the main way for, not the main way for you to take them out, right? But the one of your main board clears being that possible big play, that big swing from on the ascent. Just being like, yeah, you can take my engineers and only my engineers whenever you like. Those are for you.
No one 5 has 2 M10s. Unfortunately, not able to suppress this Aichi yet. That would be a lovely target to suppress.
Yeah, and I'm quite sure that we're either on the way to that happening or we are on the way to a big lethal from No and 5 where it's not going to matter. Dragon Slayer certainly a big card here, but too slow. And this is getting tougher and tougher.
Man,
Of course, a sickle to the Draw Boys is going to put the infantry at a 5-7, enabling a great trade on the Sky Dragon. Can even throw in 5 damage to the face. Could even throw in a stand together on an almost dead infantry unit as well, but instead we're just going to do 10. Oh, of course, lethal. The exact play that I was just talking about adds 2 to 10, which is, of course, 12. The exact number needed, and when you're a good player like No and 5, you actually find your lethals correctly. Very impressive.
Cherno committed to the face race way too early. Maybe it was tournament nerves. I don't know. I feel
Yeah,
like
maybe just thought that that was their best chance, uh, their best chance in that situation, but really expert play by No as always.
yeah, nice job knowing going forward in this bracket. And let's take a look at how the standings are before we throw it over to the dynamic duo, J King, Birdo. You know them, you love them, you hate them. They're here. I guess we'll throw it over to them right now.
Alrighty, thank you for that introduction, Corn Guy. And good morning or afternoon, depending where you are, folks. We are right in the middle of the first ever expansion tournament for cards, and we're already into round 3. So we'll see our production team finds us a game here. But what do you feel about what we've seen so far, Berta?
I'm just stuck on Corn Guy saying you hate him. I didn't know that they hated us. Even you, dear viewer, you hate it. Anyways, I'm very excited for today. We got to see some cool games earlier after we jumped around a bit to find a game that wouldn't end too fast. Um, so yeah, it's looking good.
I've been looking through the deck lists here, and it seems like the most popular 3 options are a choice between Soviet Italy control and Soviet USA self-damage, which is very fun to see Soviets sort of back in the meta after several years of stagnation. And then the choice between Britain Soviet air and Britain USA ramp, and then just Jagro as the third deck always. And of course, we've seen decks that aren't those three decks, but it does seem that the most meta line here does seem to be making that choice between the more aggressive or the more controlling Soviet deck, the more aggressive, more controlling British deck, and then Jagro. And I know you are a resident self-damage enjoyer, self-damage expert. What do you think of this new iteration of self-damage, which more tank themed, which is something I didn't think we'd ever really see into self-damage?
Yeah, so there is definitely some contention in trying to do these two things. You have to make a few sacrifices with this deck, and it can be a little clunky to play at times, but it can also just line up really well when you have these super powerful turn 1, 2s, and 3s. Um, the scary thing is sometimes you're not able to find, you know, your SU on 3, or you don't have your one drop on 1, and you know, you don't have a lot of turn 1 plays, especially if you go first, because often you might be able to play a Bloody Sickle on turn 1, but obviously if you're going first, you don't have that option. So the
I hate
deck
to cut
is
you off
really
here,
good. Yeah, sorry.
but we are into game 3, HQT versus Ephraim, and I believe this is a 2-0 match. Yes, this is a 2-0 match. Both of these players are 2-0 in the Swiss so far, so the winner of this game, which will also be the winner of this match, is going to be very, very well set for qualifying to this top 8, and it is going to be Jagro versus a USA France deck with Cyclone.
Crazy. I do like the Cyclone. It's good value. And a beefy body that, like, you're not really able to deal with all that easily. Now this is... yeah, it's a good play. I like it. And then this turn you can Aichi suppress.
Yeah, choosing to go wider, putting more pressure on immediately, knowing that his opponent can't really remove all of these threats, knowing that it's fine if Jasko blocks 1 more damage this turn, if he's going to be dealing much more than 1 damage on the following turn, which he most certainly is going to be here. And he has the choice between either going for the Audacity to take out the Jasko, or just simply Aichi suppress, leave Jasko on board. Most likely going to go for the Audacity so he can swing in with that 4-2 shock infantry and get in the full 12 damage here. And it's looking like this is going to be a very short game 3.
Yeah. Something I also always love doing is giving my opponent the feeling of security with their Jasko, and, you know, leaving it up just like an extra turn when you have the suppress, and they don't feel quite as pressured. They might feel like they can be a little bit greedier on a board clear. This is weird.
Yeah, choosing to buff up the Type 93. Perhaps, perhaps just not used to the Bomber Mafia needing 9 credits. Perhaps misreading what his opponent had ramped up to. Because fear of this board being cleared would be the primary reason of not going for Audacity, but the board can't be cleared for at least 1 more turn.
And Aichi suppression is almost better against a board clear, right? Because then you get the 3-2 out, you have Audacity for 5 damage and into a unit, and 5 damage can go anywhere you like as well.
There was also the possibility of just playing the Aichi with 4 damage with the Type 93, and then you can swing in for 12 on a completely empty board, but not going for that line. Still in a very good position so far with just really not the tools from Ephraim to respond to this. He'll be able to clear a board with this Bomber Mafia, but you know, you're still very low on health, and you have a Cyclone and a Phony War in hand. And the Phony War can refill your hand very quickly. Second Bomber Mafia is going to be a pretty good draw, though.
Yeah, even still, like, I have my doubts that it'll be enough. Because, you get the second board clear, but, each time that HQT is playing a board, he's also dealing damage, right?
Yeah,
And
and
there's just not a lot of wiggle room here.
pushing Jasko rather than playing out the B25. And it might stop some damage this turn. It's going to mean that Type 94 is not going to be able to swing into the HQ. But I think he's really going to miss not having those 5 credits spent on this following turn, not going to be able to do Bomber Mafia gunship mission. And instead is forced into the line of B25 gunship mission on the 5-2 Aichi just to stay alive on board.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where with a little more defense on the HQ, that's like easily the most natural line. But without that wiggle room, it seems like you should have just let the bomber get traded out and say, you know what, this is 3 or 5 damage that's not going to my HQ, and that's kind of what I need right now.
And we see HQT already just 1 damage off lethal this turn. Goes for the audacity here.
That's just disrespectful. Not even gonna do it on the ascent first. Come on.
And we'll see if he commits units to the board. He commits the 35T. No infantry for the op cost reduction. And we see the first compromise drawn from Ephraim. This is going to have to come out after the Bomber Mafia.
That is like the best draw on the deck.
Maybe he gets... Banshee is going to be able to clear the board.
If he wants.
He instead goes for the compromise, finds an honor and loyalty. And the issue with with playing a mill into Jagro is Jagro is just able to dump their hand faster than you can mill typically. We see HQT overdrawing some cards this turn, but look at how many cards cost 1 in his hand right now. All of those are going to be hitting the board, and Ephraim is already down both Bomber Mafias and a supply priorities.
Yeah, does he have any more copies of supply priorities?
I will check that.
Or does HQT just get to play every unit in his deck this turn?
There is 2 more supply priorities in the deck, as well as 2 firebombs. So definitely some more ways to take out a flood of units. A recon hitting the board, though, is going to be quite annoying from Ephraim, even if he is to find more of these board clears.
Yeah, I definitely like the play from HQT to play around board clears a little bit. I mean, your opponent has to have one of those board clears here to have any chance, right? So might as well play under the assumption that they have it.
Goes for the Winter Warfare. Winter War. Goes for the Phony War. There's a war in there. Before playing out the Milk Truck, which is interesting, I suppose just wanting to guarantee the most credits left over, and that is going to let him firebomb into the Calliope to clear out all of the threats this turn. But looking at HQT, this is actually just immediately lethal with the Type 94 number 2, 35T number 2, and Type 93's 2 and 3, with a desperate measures just for good measure. And that is going to be HQT going up 3-0 in the Swiss round.
You can't use that card for good measure. It explicitly says it's for desperate measure. Come on.
And yeah, just perhaps not the matchup that Ephraim was looking for, definitely with that US-France deck. Perhaps trying to find a much slower deck, a controlling deck, some of these Soviet Italy, some of these other ramp decks that we've seen, but instead getting into the very fast deck of HQT. And in this format with no bans, this is something that does have to be a consideration when you're thinking about what decks to bring. And looking at HQT's other decks in his lineup, They're all fairly aggressive. But Jago is certainly the most aggressive of those.
I've played a lot of mill into aggro decks. It is not a good time. I maybe have a 15% win rate on ladder against the Jagro when I'm playing these sorts of strategies, and it is a
Yeah,
bad time. But you
certainly,
deserve it for playing France Minor. So
certainly, U.S. is not the main nation that you're looking for if you're trying to beat more aggressive decks. With the right tools, I think Britain France Mill can definitely take on a deck like Jaguar, but US main, it's giving you the bomber mafias, it's giving you the production orders for these big bombers, these powerful turns later in the game, the credits ramp to get up to those plays, but it's at the cost of cards like Glamour Boys, like First Responders, like Monty. We saw having a big impact for Noen earlier. And with no bans in this format, I imagine a lot of these players are seeing a lot more Britain than they would normally see in a tournament like this. Just getting round 4 seeded. And with 5 rounds of this tournament, we're getting to the point where we are going to start to, see players drop out, and we might see our first, if we can see a player get up to 4-0, I believe that will be a guaranteed qualification to the top 8, which will be played and streamed here, wherever you're watching this, next weekend. And it looks like we will be getting into a 3-0 game. We'll be getting HQT versus his opponent.
well said. Twee, I think we're getting information that it's Twee to Cargo's game that we're going to be hopping into.
And we'll be pulling up that game in just a second here. The Swiss round, trying to run a stream in a Swiss round is much a different experience than a tournament, because the rounds are going all the time, keeping things moving. You are not simply going from set to set to set. But that also lets us see a much more a wider variety of players, a wider variety of decks than we might typically see in a more closed format, which it's definitely interesting. We get to see decks like that US France Cyclone Mill. Hopefully, though, we will see some a couple longer games. The standout to me so far from this event is just how fast the games are. But not just how fast the games are and the decks are, but how fast players are playing, to be completely honest. And I don't know if that's to do with the format or just to do with the meta, or if they're just very comfortable with the decks. But it does feel like players are just playing incredibly fast in all of these games, regardless of what deck they're playing with or against.
Plus, we're starting early enough that you don't have the wanting to go to bed excuse anymore.
And yeah,
I
we've seen some pretty notable upsets. We saw Noen bounce back, but Noen did lose in the first round. Tang Tang dropping 0-2 early on, and we've seen a lot of new names to the top, and some reoccurring names. HQT, of course, going 3-0 is a name that we've seen before, but it is interesting that this format is bringing up some new names. Also, with the qualification being in the post-Worlds situation, you might have a lot more players who are, a lot of players seem to take breaks in December and January following these big events.
Yeah, and I'm sure that has something to do with the holiday season, right? New Year's and Christmas, and sometimes getting back into it, getting up to a tournament level again as well can be a little bit hard. Not for you, but I know some players, they get a little bit rusty when they lay off the game for a few weeks, a couple months. I know I certainly do, and I've suffered from it in the past, and I'll suffer from it in the future.
And here we are into game 1 of round 4 between HQT and Tweede Cargo. It is going to be, I believe this is going to be a Brit-Soviet Air mirror, if I recall their deck lists correctly.
Man, that opening hand, if you were against a Jagro, you'd just full keep and win the game on the spot. It's pretty sad that, the perfect hand against one deck is kind of just not very good at all against another. Still better than HQT's hand, though. Jeez.
Yeah, we see the Spitfire, and Spitfire is a very interesting card in the air mirror because sometimes, regardless of how turns 1 to 3 went, if Spitfire comes down on 4 and they don't have an answer, sometimes they're just forced to play a close air support and then trade their entire board into it, and that's also spending their entire turn doing so. But that we'll have to see if we get there. In the meantime, Tweede Cargo is just going to get right ahead with this sea embargo, picking up a second Gladiator. And HQT just goes straight for the tempo commando. I love this play. I feel like oftentimes we see players hold on to commandos a bit too long, looking for the best unit, the biggest unit in the deck. But just playing it as a tempo card, and in this case, reducing the health of the 2/4 Gladiator by 3 to make it take out by the other Gladiator, and we see it stick on board. And now we see Twee's options here on the second sea embargo. Most likely going to take the Shark here, I have to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you're not playing around second number 9 commando, are you? So, J. King, how many sea embargoes are you on after the nerf?
The nerf, I think I'd say somewhere between 2 and 3. I don't think you're doing 4 anymore, especially just because the top picks for ally nations for Brit Air are Soviet and Japan, and they are both bringing their own buff cards to the table as well. And we're also seeing it's making room. We see in these decks, we see a large number of commandos, a much larger number of commandos making it into these decks than we've seen in the past. And then with that, we see the Baker Street Irregulars making it into their way into some of these air decks as just an extra sort of hand refill option. So we're seeing some innovations and testing around with what you can do in air now that it's not just immediately for sea embargo, for close air support, what 4 duty bound or 3 claim the skies, whatever ally you're doing. And the Desert Dust here is definitely interesting to me. This is a card that I've not really played around with in air, and it's a card I haven't really seen played against in air either.
Yeah, it is interesting. It does sort of add another way to burn out your opponent at the end a little bit. Not if you're completely behind, but if they're starting to turn the corner, you pin the one unit that's able to attack your backline and get a couple of guys. I definitely don't hate it.
It also does summon 2 bodies on the board. Similarly to HMS Illustrious, obviously, very different context. And they are just 2 bodies that they give guard, so you can use them to guard up an air unit, but then they're also just 2 bodies on the board for something like a close air support. Now, sometimes 2 bodies on the board can be quite difficult to fit, as we see it more in HQT's situation. It would be quite difficult for him to get out Desert Dust here without having to spend the credits to push up all of these other units. But we are seeing some wild cards that we are not used to seeing in Brit Air mirrors, which is probably the most seen matchup across KARDS tournament history, and we're seeing a lot of cards in here for the first time, courtesy of these Baker Street Irregulars developing into these commandos and these British orders, picking up the Majesty's Chosen.
Yeah, these are not very great hits for HQT, I don't feel.
Not fantastic. I mean, I've played a lot of Baker Street Irregulars, but I've been primarily playing it in decks that would get more synergy sort of regardless of what you're playing. Like in a deck like Commandos, where just any order is fine. Like you're fine with a cheap order, even if it's less impactful, or you're fine with something bigger. In Air, what are the orders that you're specifically looking for? Because obviously the odds of like getting a 5th cast is quite low. Looking for that specifically, but I suppose there's a few things you can get.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fair number of orders that, are pretty great for Brit Air, Convoy, MI5, Sea Patrol. The units are a little harder to hit something of value on.
Really, you're just primarily looking for most likely a number 9 commando.
Yeah.
And we see here the Spitfire is coming out. Twee has Wrath Lightning, but he does not have a particularly easy way of getting it out of his hand. He would have to trade out the Shark as the only way to get out the Wrath Lightning, which sort of defeats the purpose of playing the Wrath Lightning. But with the second close air support, he's going to be able to deal with a huge chunk of this board. And the 2 garrison units, they're chipping away at HQT's health, and they are going to keep this Shark alive.
So, I find it very surprising that Twee decided to not guard his HQ at seemingly no cost if the Trike was just on the far right side of his support line. And he's taken 1 damage from that placement. And now HQT, I mean, he has the opportunity to go face here, but...
Claim the Skies here. Big draw. That's going to help HQT deal up with this board. Twee, a member of the Draw Last club with that Bloody Sickle. It definitely, perhaps not the best way to navigate through that turn. But he's clearly sees his game plan. He's down on hand size by a massive amount. And with Spitfire being on board with no clear answers, Twee is recognizing that his win condition is just racing down his opponent. HQT is just going to try to remove as many of these units as possible. Most likely not even going to remove the Shark, because this Spitfire is going to be blocking it regardless.
HQT could go for the HQ if he, was really brave here. With the Kitty Hawk in hand, he's going for it.
And drops his own Desert Dust. And yeah, this can put lethal damage out quite quickly. He has the Sincerely Yours in hand to try to heal out of Twee's burn. He has Kitty Hawk to help sort of end out the game. Twee here
it does kind of just lose to Wrath, though, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, usually when it's turn 7, your opponent has had an opportunity to play the Wrath against your Spitfire. Unfortunately, in this game, that was not the case, and maybe HQT didn't quite, keep track well enough to say, oh, my opponent actually hasn't had the opportunity to play Wrath in a very good spot. He is also just low on cards.
Choosing to take out the Shark there is a quite interesting decision to me, because when you're playing any other deck other than Brit Air, Bombers are by far the biggest threat. But when you're playing Brit Air yourself, your deck has so many fighters in it that usually the enemy's fighters, or just whatever other units, are typically higher value targets than Bombers, just because you can sort of control what Bombers are able to do. And it does leave him in this tricky situation where Tweeted Cargo has infantry and fighters, all of which can choose to go into the HQ regardless of whether this Spitfire comes back onto the board. That's going to force HQT to be a bit more reactive in his play here.
Yeah, so I did think about, like, on that turn, maybe HQT could have taken out the last guard in the support line, which also has the added benefit that Twee isn't able to double push up his bomber and fighter to get a guard on the HQ again.
And yeah, HQT's choice to not take out these garrisons, they've been on the board for quite a few turns now. I believe they've done 6 damage at least, and there's still a 1-4 and a 2-4 body. It's showing sort of the strength of Desert Dust in this deck, but it's also showing that players might just not be familiar with the card. Obviously, HQT knows what Garrison does, but just he's probably not as familiar with the play patterns of going up against these Garrison units, maybe underestimating just how quickly they will chip away at his HQ total. However, this Monty draw into the Wellington with a HMS Illustrious pickup. Obviously, there's some fighters that are blocking these Blitz bombers in the future, but of course, Twee has one turn to deal with this 7/7 Spitfire, or at the very least, find a way to pin it.
Yeah, there is a Monty of his own hiding somewhere in there. And with 3 draws, at least, to find something, maybe you find... I don't have his deck list pulled right up. Does he run second RAF? Either way, there's a few options.
Twee is only on the 1 RAF Lightning. It does have a single number 9 commando in the list. No Sexton. So, not actually significantly fewer ways of dealing with the Spitfire than HQT's list. We're seeing sort of these deck list differences coming in big here, and that is just going to be the game. Twee not finding an answer to this Spitfire. And, I mean, we saw it from the opening mulligan. Twee had the better opening hand for the first couple turns, but that fell off very quickly. And just Spitfire is such a monster in this mirror match.
Oh, that's so sad that, like, you don't even need to attack with any of your planes. You just want to move one up and you're able to kill the Spitfire. That's like insult to injury, I feel.
Yeah, but that is going to be game 1 between those players. Of course, these are all best of 3s. And we'll see if we will follow that set or find some other games, but that's definitely going to be one to keep an eye out on, with HQT, of course, being 3-0, and Tweeted Cargo being 2-1 in the Swiss round.
So I just want to say, you brought up no Sexton. Maybe I'm stuck in my old ways, but to me, that's sacrilegious.
Yeah, there has been a shockingly low number of Sextons in air decks. Really since the introduction of Sea Embargo. I feel like people have started to move away from that card. And whether it's correct or not, I mean, it's difficult to say. It's a very difficult card to evaluate its impact. But here we see Twee running it back on air again, this time going into the Jagro of HQT. And HQT is not bailed out with the good series of opening draws like he was in the previous game. This is a very, very rough hand, especially with that Aunt Frida in the hand, needing an infantry to proc its first trigger.
Yeah, I've played with Aunt Frida before, and this is the cost of running such a powerful card. Is the inconsistency it brings in to the draws.
Yeah, I've been convinced that Aunt Frida is a better card than I had originally given it credit for. Obviously, we've seen it's very popular in Jagro decks today. And it is a very, very powerful card, but man, when I play with it, I swear, sometimes you'll draw 3 Ant Fridas, and your, like, 12 infantry will all not be in the top 20 cards of your deck. You just can't play cards, and it's a very feels-bad situation. HQT dropping the suppression without the draw, and then spending 2 credits to operate this 35T to take out Chaika. Not the situation he wants to be in. However, Twee's opening hand has not been stellar either. This is it definitely a a battle of the rough draws. Dragon Slayer got to come out. Most likely, well, I suppose there's a couple different options, because there is the number 9 Commando and Bloody Sickle.
Yeah, I mean, I do also feel like with the Spitfire, it's sort of a mind game, but your opponent is almost forced to trade into it out of respect for Wrath Lightning when you have this many cards in hand, right?
Yeah, you also have to imagine your opponent's hand's pretty bad when you saw turn 1 pass, turn 2 35T. Here we see the second 35T. This one does operate for free, and choosing to push up the shock infantry rather than getting the Ant Frida immediately. I do like this play. And ooh, do you goes for the Monty Spitfire, picks up the HMS Illustrious. That's really good. I was just the shark sitting in hand just really wants a cheap area. There's so many many close plays.
I feel like if Twee played Monty first, he would have just played this HMS Illustrious, right? And traded off one of the 35Ts. Set yourself up better for Shark, set yourself up better for a cast draw, right?
Yeah, and HQT would have the best response to that in the form of On the Ascent, so it...
yeah,
but
that's very true.
It's still definitely a play Twee might have gone for, and this just sort of highlights why drawing first is so important, is because even on, like, turn 5, you think, well, what draw could I possibly get that would drastically change, you know, my play, but we'll see that would have drastically changed the trajectory of this game. We obviously don't know who's going to win it yet, but had it been HMS Illustrious take out one of these tanks into the On the Ascent, very different game in just a series of really one turn passed back and forth. But instead, we do see the Spitfire sticking on the board. It can be buffed up to 6 attack. Probably not going to try to face race in this situation. Maybe trade out these two.
Nah, you're just not as brave.
That is true. Twee can clear out the entire front line. It does use up his entire turn, and it will leave him with an empty board. But, I mean, clearing out 3 units, leaving no damage on board. You've seen 2 35Ts from your opponent.
Yeah, it kind of becomes, in my mind, a question of, you know, how many expansions do you think your opponent is going to be able to play and, like, have in hand next turn? He knows 2 of the cards in his opponent's hand, but they're, you know, with a bad start, you could very well be expecting an expansion here as well, right?
Drops the Shark in there. Very solid play. He could have cleared out the board without playing the Shark, but this way it does just develop the Bomber onto the board, giving him a target to buff and attack with if it sticks. Now we see the hand from HQT. It is definitely not sticking. In this case, getting taken out by the Key Ann. And if you're Twee, you're sad that you're sad that you lose the Shark, but you're so happy your opponent floats 2 credits.
Yeah, for sure. And you say Twee was able to clear the front line without the Shark. I didn't see that, how he could maneuver that. Could you explain that?
thinking about that further, I am definitely incorrect about that. I was thinking he could attack Claim the Skies, attack the lower attack unit, and then the higher attack unit. But that Spitfire would die after the Claim the Skies at the first attack. So yeah, this is. Don't listen to me. Tweet getting down 3 swordfish here. Unfortunately, it is going to walk into On the Ascent Radiant Brigade to clear the board, which you know your opponent has 2 unknown cards in hand. This is essentially the worst case scenario for you in this situation.
Yeah, you can anticipate one of them, I think. But you know, you can't really feel prepared for both.
It does definitely raise the question of, with On the Ascent being such a big possibility, perhaps maybe going for a close air support to bring both of their attacks up to 2, just so at least your opponent doesn't get a... Or they have to sacrifice their recon. They lose to 2-3. Going for Crusader Convoy. Choosing to
I
just
kind of feel like
draw.
I feel like giving your Crusader +1/+1 here is better than Bloody Sickle.
Yeah, and you get the card draw. You don't get to develop, but you do get the card draw because, of course, the embargo is still a British order. And Tweet, seeing that
Yes.
line, and I'm a huge fan of Crusader in air. Now, I'm not sure if it's the best way to build air, but it's definitely a more fun way to build air. And Tweet is showing the power of Crusader, already having drawn him 2 cards.
This is like the worst case scenario you ever play Crusader in as well, to be fair.
And we see if it does stick, it's going to pop off with 3 close air supports in hand and Gladiator finally being picked up. Of course, HQT almost certainly going to use the recon and Swordfish to take out this Crusader. Although there, of course, is the possibility of just going face for 8 damage, dropping Twee down. That's exactly what he's going to do. He's just going to flood the board, drop Twee down. Twee is not running wave after wave, so there is no real board clears in the deck. These Swordfish are going to get blocked quite easily. Raft Lightning can either retreat one of these infantry or get the Type 93 off the board. Surely... Well, I guess you're going for...
If you do this, then either you have to play Sincerely Yours, or trade out the 4 attack one, right?
Well, yeah, but he can... It does go down to 3 attack, and then he can also cast his Crusader up. You are still you're going down to 1 guaranteed in this situation.
Yeah.
Which is risky, but there's... You know, you have the healing in hand, you know your opponent only has 1 card. And HQT, this is a weird situation. Do you trade with the recon to get the draw now, and then you can trade out one of the Swordfish and then the Errata? Do you trade out both Swordfish to Errata immediately? Do you just simply drop them to 1 and wait for the following turn to play Errata?
I feel like I'm trading the recon here. Maybe it's because I'm too anxious to find the win, but...
Goes for it. Finds the Audacity, and that's going to be a really annoying unit for Twee to deal with. And with the Type 93, that's going to get buffed up. Goes down to 1. Interesting that he didn't play the Type 93 before trading out the 2. Oh, I guess he couldn't, because then he wouldn't be able to errata. Don't mind
Yeah. Well, it is still, like, an interesting consideration. Like, do you go for the errata, or do you go for the, like, higher guaranteed damage?
Wee is desperately trying to stay alive in this situation. You have to take out the errata, knowing the 2 cards in HQT's hand.
He's doing okay here, though.
Yeah, he can take out.
I find this trade weird because I feel like you want to trade out the raiding brigade so that HQT doesn't get the draw for free without
Yeah.
having to sacrifice damage to the HQ,
I
and
think
like
it's
you
like
have to kill the fighter. Oh
does
no!
he forgets.
Oh no!
He
doesn't.
forgets and just dies on board. And that the tiny errata that could suddenly becomes a 7-8 and ends the game. HQT or Twee realizes his mistake before the cards are even done being played, and that is going to be an unfortunate loss for Twee. HQT now going 4-0 in the Swiss and punching his ticket to the top 8 next weekend.
Wow, you gotta hover over that little I button. You know, it lets you see some stuff in their hand. It can be useful once in a while. That
Yeah.
is rough.
And that, man, that's just one of those cards where I could definitely see myself making that same mistake, where you know, like if you stopped and were asked like what's in your opponent's hand, and you're like, oh, obviously it's the third stage of hand freedom. We're going to, they're going to buff it up. I need to remove the fighters, but like in your head, you're like, Arato's just a 1/2 on board. They played it to draw a card, whatever. Like I need to remove the bigger attack thing, stop the expansion possibility, and it just slips the mind momentarily, and it leads to that mistake. But that is going to be it from us for now, and we are now going to throw it back to Corn and Thanatron, who are going to walk you through the rest of round 4 here. So, Corn and Thanatron, take it away.
Oh, we're taking it. We are back, and we have just a tiny bit of round 4 left for you, and then we are going to roll right into round 5. Just a quick scoreboard check for you. Our current undefeated beasts are HQT with a nice 4-0 that we just saw, and Taboo with an excellent 4-0 as well. As some of our other players start to trickle in with their results. Corn, do you have any big takeaways from our 2 frontrunners so far?
No big takeaways yet. Assuming they're going to be seated against each other, so I guess that will be the conclusion time when they face. I'm keeping my mind flexible and open to all the possibilities of this Blood and Iron tournament. So I like to catch what we can. Do you have any big takeaways yourself?
It's super interesting, right? Like as you said, this is a Swiss, so with 2 4-0 players, they are destined to play each other. There are quite a few 3-1s, but those are the only undefeated players. So we do know that HQT and Taboo will be playing each other, but we also know that it really won't matter except for seeding purposes. As J King said, 4-0 is going to guarantee them into the tournament regardless. So that is just going to be a match between 2 beasts just for funsies, which you'll love to see. But we are going live here to the end of our round 4. This is a matchup between No and 5, and that is No and 5 losing.
Oh man.
Yep,
That's-
we are bringing you lightning matches here today. Me and Corn's specialty actually is the 10-second match. We are cursing these players,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And
The
that is the
time-
very end of round 4. So no problems. We will get you into our final round today, round 5. Just a quick second here as our players get ready for their 5th round, and we tally the scoreboard here. Taking a look at the scoreboard, let's see. We have, as we were just talking about, Taboo and HQT at the very top at 4-0. And then the 3-1s will take us all the way down to 6th place, and that'll be Freely Kai, No and 5, and then number 1 has got a 1 in his name. Not quite sure how to say it, how to pronounce that. And then 2 and 2s make it into our top 8 via the tiebreakers. 7 and 8 positions are a 2 and 2, and then 9 and 10 are also 2 and 2s, losing those tiebreakers, which includes tweet Decarago, as we have seen him on stream a couple times. So it's really starting to take shape here. What are you looking at in round 5? So for the 4 3-1s, uh will be going. So that's Free Takali and No and 5 among them, right? So uh that's definitely like a win and in situation for them. What do you think that they're sort of what's going through the players' minds there in those win and in situations?
I mean, you're still pretty relaxed. There is no bans, and the deck. There's no real surprises in the deck lists, so you probably just think about which list you're going to bring first, and there's not necessarily a matchup that you have to get in order to guarantee that you can come out in the end. Um, I mean, you're probably really glad that your last match is about to start so soon.
Mhm.
These matches are flying off the shelves. Um,
And we are going to get, for our round 5, we are going to get Jan versus C. So that is going to be Jan Hino versus C, with Jan being in currently 7th place with, or 8th place actually, with a tenuous 2-2. So this is going to be a really nice match here. This is going to be a possible win and in situation for Jan. They're 2-2, is looking solid on their tiebreakers. So a win here, you got to figure that their 3-2 is going to have those same tiebreakers as well.
nice.
Just giving a
Uh,
minute here for our players. Sorry to interrupt, Corn. Giving our players maybe taking a bathroom break real quick. They are getting down to it. We'll have it
No
for you in
problem.
just a moment.
So we will have 1-5-0 between HQT and Taboo. We will have 3 4-1s, if I'm correct.
Uh, should only be 2, right? There's 4 currently. 2 of them have to lose.
True, but the loser who's of the 4-0s will drop to 4-1. That makes 3.
3. I see. You're always one step ahead.
You got to these days. And then uh, we also some 3-2 players as well. So 3-2 with good tiebreakers. You can snag yourself a top 8 for your efforts. And really, I guess this is where my brain is going to. Um, when you have this meta where people are, for the most part, bringing pretty similar lists with splash 1 or 2 differences for your third list, the results, I guess my first observation is the results. You can get lucky in a series, if with the top decks, but with so many mirror matches, I feel like a lot of it, to have success through 5 rounds, it is going to have to be a lot on how you are navigating, how you're playing each match.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely stressful, right? I know I for sure have made an open top 8 on a tiebreaker, and I know that I have uh lost out on an open top 8 due to a tiebreaker, or it might have been top 16. I can't remember, but the next stage, right? And I believe you've definitely been in similar situations as well. So it definitely, when you're in that last round of a Swiss and you know that this is winning in and lose and probably out, or even the situation where you win but you're not necessarily in, you win but you can definitely get in, and you kind of have to sit and watch the rest of the tournament, you know, or even after the tournament ends, you got to wait for the tiebreaker calculators on the website to add everything up. It's a lot to process for sure for these players.
All right, so we get the Jagro mirror match, and the Yokosuka being played to the back line favors the expansion on turn 2, you know, barring a out of the mist.
Choosing not to ride the tank to the front line, most likely not a problem for Jan to get off the expansion, and actually chooses not to do it. So no worries there. Raiding Brigade for C in hand as well. So that's an early signal brigade played, and an early answer to it as well for Jan. So both players really just pulling stuff out.
Yeah, definitely could go a lot of different ways. Seeing the state of the board, the raiding brigade to stop the recon draw here is an interesting choice. Definitely trying to deny the draw from the opponent. However, we just see so much AoE potential. 2 desperate measures. The big orders are coming out to play in this matchup.
And the Kian, again, we've seen a lot of Kian already today. Someone earlier playing as well, the new Blood and Iron Japanese elite tank. I keep forgetting its name off the top of my head, but really cool to see those new cards make their entrance and make a play, make a big deal. We'll see the and used right away. Clear that front line.
While this is developing, sorry about that. While this is developing, here's a is when you are bringing lists for this type of format, with no bans, we've seen a lot of players bring triple aggro. Would you consider bringing your 2 favorite aggro lists and then 1 change up, you know, 1 anti-aggro, or to try to, because you don't have to play it. You're never going to be stuck on it. But if you have that matchup, you can just bring the most guaranteed. But maybe that self damage list is your, you feel really comfortable on that versus Jagro, and that's what that slot is filling. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so your kind of brain, the way that you can think about it in a game with no bans, right, is it's almost like a sideboard. That third deck almost feels like a sideboard option, because you know that you basically have the 2 that you're actually rolling with, and then you sort of have the curveball, the one weird answer, the Swiss Army knife, perhaps not the wrong, because it's definitely not like a jack of all trades thing where it has maybe a lot of good matchups, but maybe one good matchup or really good matchups into the aggro decks, as you said. Sort of something that you can use specifically to target. In this game, Aunt Frida doing a lot of work, able to put out a lot of buffs and a lot of damage all at once. Looking pretty nice here for C. He actually has the desperate measures as well to kill the bomber, so can certainly threaten here. Could even think about the Shinano with some really nice pings. Yeah, I would actually probably love Dragon Slayer Goes with the suppression here. I don't think you're in any danger of that card being a real problem. And I maybe would have liked to get some Shinano pings while the board was a little fatter. What do you think about that? That is Shinano, right? All the way to the left. I'm not
Yeah, it
crazy.
is. I mean, you have a
It's over.
unit with 4 health, so that could just eat a lot of them up, which would not be as appealing.
True.
But I mean, you're in a winning position, and you're just trying not to throw it at that point. I mean, you don't know what your opponent has, but saving the Shinano for a potential lethal is a fine way to navigate that as well. We see that C has won. Moving on to match
C.
2. Match 2. I don't know. Is I guess pulling up the tiebreakers, is a 2-0 here more advantageous for tiebreakers?
Oof. That would be a interesting call. The first tiebreaker, I believe, is head-to-head wins and then a Buckholz. So not sure I can get that to you on the fly. But as we said, for Jan, who lost game 1 to C, he needs the match no matter what. C at 1 and 2.
C did have a bye. I don't know if that was brought
I was
up.
going to say that must be it. I was actually searching for how he was only 1 and 2. But yep, C with a looks like a bye in round 2. So at 1 and 2, bye is a little brutal. I don't think at 2 and 2 they will be able to get in no matter what. So we will have to see about that. But for Jan, very big.
Gotta love this start for the Soviet control so far. Feel pretty confident with the removal with the extra health. And why not just keep it rolling? Just
Certainly what he wants.
take a little 3 health here.
And this can get very rough for Jan very quick. Not being able to find a win with his Jagro could go down a very quick 2-0 with his top 8 hopes going down just as fast. Blitz Doctrine is a great card, but a little slow on the tempo here. It's not like Soviet Italy is going to be a fast deck, but he would love to find an answer to that Fiat just slamming him in the face and giving health to C.
Yeah, and no infantry unit for the 35 Ts to trigger off of, but you may as well have just pushed it up to trade the Fiat, and C is just going to be allowed to keep the Fiat alive to add 3 more health again. Stalingrad is going to be
2
healthy.
more Fiats. 2 more Fiats in hand as well, right? I wouldn't even hate the turn of throwing the 3-1 Fiat into the Zerstorer and throwing the Sickle and then the other Fiat down as well. Of course, giving you a total of 5 health since you have Engineers out and then replacing the Fiat. But there's nothing wrong with the current line either. Jan getting himself a draw off the expansion. As soon as the turn starts, drawing first, second to action, but or card played, but first action.
At this point, the Jagro player is going to have to realize we're in this for the long haul, and just be content at whittling down the health and refilling the board, and winning, forcing the Soviet list to expend all of its resources and then refilling and then expending all the resources. But it's quite baffling that the fiat is allowed to live this entire time, and no trade. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
at some point, you figure if you allow Stalingrad to get an extra 12 or 15 health, the game becomes almost unwinnable. And some point, like if you allow them to get anywhere close to double their health over the course of the game, it's got to be unwinnable for Jagro. Jagro is definitely a race car.
And if you're face racing, you're just saying, hey, I can do more than 3 damage per turn. I don't know. This is
Yeah, it's certainly getting to be quite racy. But we see here with a lot of good options. Sickle is going to be super useful. Of course, Jan going for the suppression on the guard. So joining the race, so to speak, and saying if you want to sprint, we can sprint. But that means that Maki and engineers, or I'm sorry, the Fiat and the engineers both remain unsuppressed, which means that all that face damage that you did is coming back, baby. It's not too big a deal for the guy with all these options.
yeah, and with that trade, you gotta feel like, or not the trade, but the bloody sickle, that this turn is going to be another trade turn, and we're saving our depth of winter. We're saving our ammo for most likely next turn. A moment of tension as both players
Yeah, with
have
all the health
reached.
coming back to C, I could maybe have seen him throwing the 3-1 Fiat into the 3-3 Seiyun, because he's throwing down the other one anyway. And the 4-2 restore, it's like, okay, if you want to make the 4-2 restore trade into the fresh Fiat, that's fine. If not, then I have ways to deal with that next turn. But getting close to C's like he doesn't really even have to worry about taking any risks for more optimal trades down the line or anything like that, because he's just about to play all these power cards, right? Your entire back line gone, Naval Brigade. All of your planes or all of your ground units gone from strategic. Maybe your entire board gone from winter warfare or I'm sorry, winter offensive, replaced with just some dudes.
Yeah, Jagro's done an impressive job of whittling the health down despite how much health. I mean, C has gotten as much health as you could have hoped for.
Yeah, really, really keeping in there.
And holding
18. Sorry, just a quick recap. 18 defense from one Fiat, 2 defense from another Fiat, 6 defense from the 329th Engineer Battalion, and then 2 defense from the 3rd Fiat.
Oh my
So
god.
we are talking 28 total extra defense. But I very naively said if Stongard is able to completely double his health, that it becomes unwinnable. And that seems like a big, dumb idiot statement right now. So let's see. Of course, like I said, all those powerful board clears in C's hand, just holding on to them. And Jagger now at this point making trades, not going face, not what Jagger wants. Engineers still gaining health. I don't even know that it would be the worst play for the on the ascent here. Maybe you get your own engineers, and as you make some of these trades, maybe get your own health back. Stop the Soviet player from gaining any more health. That's probably all of his, all of his fiat's gone, all of his, unless he has a call to the colonies, but I don't suspect that that's probably the case, right? And then you get your own engineers from stealing it and maybe claw yourself 2, 4, even 6 possibly health back. And even just 2 might be a really big deal. See, thinking about pushing the Maki for the lethal.
It seems
Not a-
good.
Yeah, it certainly blocks the bomber as well. I would like to see him push the 5-3 up. It's no longer guard right. It's been suppressed. I'm not really sure that you gain anything by leaving it in the back line. Might as well make him saw through that with some units. Obviously, with the Type 93 in hand, he just, throws down the Type 93 and the 35T trades it out. So that would have made that trade a little harder, a little more interesting. Of course, he could have just used the plane. It wouldn't have mattered.
Despite
Thinking about
having
a
a huge
sickle, thinking
hand,
about a draw.
it does seem like an awkward turn.
Only needs 2 damage now. Oh, he does have a call to the
got it.
colonies. I was wrong. I did not check the deck list. That's all he will need. And that will be a dramatic win for C, who is going to take it 2-0. And unfortunately for Jan, going to gatekeep Jan from the top 8, I believe. So a huge match for the implications of the top 8 as a whole and of the tournament. Not the best showing for Jan, but a new player, someone who is not necessarily ultra familiar with the scene, and a really great showing for someone who has not been around that often. So not going to take anything away from them. Look forward to maybe seeing them in the next Swiss.
Yeah, unfortunately, coming at on 2-2 with a bye, it's not going to do you any favors. Unfortunately, if you are smitten with a bye, you have to ball out and win the matches that you do have. Unfortunately, with the way it's set up, so C most likely will not qualify, especially with knocking your opponent out of the top 8.
The bye does go in as a win, I believe, in the end. So they will end
Yeah,
at 3-2. But like you said, it just does not have the power in the tiebreak sense of a real win. So little unfortunate, but unfortunately, what happens when a Swiss is run and a lot of players just aren't able to make it, whether that be for their scheduling restrictions or for what have you. But we're going to jump back into a game here, wrapping up today's action with a round 5 Taboo versus HQT match. This is, of course, for the number 1 seed in the top 8. The winner of this will be a perfect 5-0 on the day and will be in that catbird seat.
big cat verb. Is there seeding so that if you finish 1, you would play 8 in the
I believe so. Yes, I am actually getting told by our wonderful production staff that that is officially true.
so there's definitely some theoretical advantage to getting yourself the winning and then getting to play the 8th seed player, presumably.
Yeah, somebody that's going to squeak in with tie breaks.
Someone who's squeaking with tie breaks. I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't, if I was the number 1 seed, and any 8th seed from this field is certainly capable of defeating me. But I still would try to take that number 1 seed for that theoretical benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, just to say that you won the Swiss, objectively won today's Swiss, first place. Not going to get you anything except for some confidence and some bragging rights, but those aren't nothing.
Yeah, like we said earlier, we all love to tell our mom how we did in the Swiss round.
That's true. I did it, Ma.
Jagro versus Brit Air. It looks pretty even so far. We got some pretty crucial turns coming up to see which way this match will swing.
Yeah, not quite sure of the score here. I can assume that this is not game 1, as round 5 has been going for quite a bit.
Chooses to erase the Spitfire and leave the bomber. Makes sense considering there are 2 fighters in Taboo's hand to deny the bomber eventually.
He's got a really clean answer as well for the Signal Brigade. Could throw down the commando, kill the signal with a sickle, could kill the type in the back line, and then maybe even cast to get some survivability on the bomber, and make that little feller, your little commando feller, just that little bit bigger.
Man.
And perhaps seeing this exact line, my stars.
We are seeing Baker Street irregulars today, folks.
And a nice German Sherman. His second one, actually, the other one already in hand. But gonna be quite useful for Taboo. I gotta assume that he presses that up to the front line, especially since he has the cavalry. If HQT really chooses to take that out, he can, of course, enable the op cost reduction on the Panzer with just the 1 cost cavalry, no problem.
Yeah, and normally a 4-4, a 5-5, 35T from the combined arms is a formidable foe. But the card that was developed from Baker Street Irregulars is an air power, so it will auto kill any tank no matter how much it has been buffed.
Yeah, excellent eye on that. Not gonna be super fun for Taboo. Out of the Mist is nice.
We'll take that.
Yeah, I'll take a mobilize. I'll take a mobilize guy. That's fine. Just something that you gotta answer. You just gotta. And we'll take your shiny best bomber as well. Like you said, air power probably gonna come down here right away. But hey, moves were made and they turned out pretty good. We're gonna have another German Sherman coming right after, another 20 Panzergren, and then the Seiyun and the Dragon Slayer also. Some real nice bomber blockers. Taboo.
Yeah.
Possibly turning the corner here.
When you see that air power come down, you immediately pull the deck list up and check, and then you realize that your opponent got that off the Baker Street. Oh, man.
Interesting too, right? The Out of the Mist was used to kill a 1/1 mobilize, and the upside of that, right, is that you get a 1/1 mobilize, which has the opportunity to grow. So you throw that out, and then HQT seeing that is like, well, I don't want you to have that unit that's about to sit there and grow. So he uses an entire albacore ping to take care of that. When now, as we see, plenty of tanks and infantry coming out, albacore with, you know, some better potential targets. Oh, that would be nice if it wasn't for the 0-4 blocking any kind of good on the ascent play. Pioneers not super helpful there, so we're just going to go big boys. We're just going to go big planes. We're going to block these bombers. But the arty in the back line, 4 or 5 Sexton. I believe Berto said earlier about it being sacrilege, all these non-Sexton players. And I 100% agree. It's still good. It's been good forever. It's still just absolutely worth playing. It's so close to an auto include in my mind.
I feel like the suppression on the Sexton to leave the Panzergren as a threat in the front line, rather than just playing a Type 93. The Type 93 is able to be buffed with combined arms, though, so maybe it's kind of just trying to sneak it in there so that you can buff it into a 4-4-5-5 under the radar. But
Huge synthetic rubber gonna make that Sexton maybe unkillable. Or is it going to go on a bomber because the Sexton already can choose the plane that it's going to kill? So yeah, that makes way more sense. Huge bomber with huge health.
wow,
Taboo losing his board. This is game 3, by the way, so this will be the decider.
huge suppression value, taking the unit from 8 to 1.
Yeah, but that Sexton, man, still looming so large. And HQT playing, targeting those tanks super well, making that combined arms, a dead card in hand until Taboo finds something else to play it with.
That air power pool is proving how important it was. If you found like some dead British order that wasn't useful, um, air power certainly is a great pool as this game goes on, and the HQT's the rest of his cards file in.
Yeah, Baker
Also
Street
note
Irregulars doing work.
that Taboo has been doing a decent job playing around Montes, splitting the big units in the back line.
A lot of thought being paid here. Not a ton of resources for either player, but things can really change quickly on a top deck at this point.
And this is where um, if you're playing the Jagro, you have one you have one copy or two of Commit the Reserves, to deal with these Sextons, these high value units that you need to remove. Just point and shoot. See,
And to your point earlier, if he suppresses the Sexton, right, not only does that pin stop the 20 Panzergren from being so useless in the front line for so long, but it also keeps the Sexton at only 3 damage. And we can see now that is the second 4 health unit that the 4 damage Sexton is able to just make an incredibly clean and efficient trade on. Putting the Sexton down to that 3rd damage, even regardless of the pin, would have been a huge play for just how these numbers work out, for how all these trades are going to work out in HQT's favor.
yeah, and looking at Taboo's Jagro list, it has one Out of the Mist and no commit the reserves. So it has 3 suppressions, so it's kind of built more around having big planes and 20 Panzer Grenadier for the late game.
Seeing this now, knowing that his recon unit is now a pain in his patoot, preventing the on the ascent play from taking out 2 planes. But really nice here. Can maybe survive the turn. Obviously, a lot of damage. Maybe can't survive the turn. Also, the Raft Lightning is also going to make that Aichi irrelevant. It is not going to be able to answer the Sexton next turn. Really just looking like HQT has wrapped this up.
Yeah, HQT.
Interesting. We're just going to go complete face. We're going to go clear the sky. We'll do it this way. We'll do it live. And yeah, there's just going to be no real answer. That is interesting. But again, the Sexton just too big, too huge. Never finding an answer for it. Certainly seems like we should have maybe played our suppression there, but a lot of decisions had to be made. Certainly a tough game, and the best part about this for these 2 players is there were no losers in this match. These are 2 guys that have already secured their seats in the money top 8. So I don't think it'll be too hard of feelings as we see Taboo go ahead and scoop. That will be a perfect 5-0 day for HQT. Really nice work.
Nice work by HQT coming out and saying, hey, this is my ladder. You know, knowing 5, I know you like to ladder, but around here, this is my part. This is my Swiss ladder.
This is my Swiss ladder. That's what HQT is saying. We are going to go ahead and throw it back to our other cast team in Berto and J King, and they are going to talk about the standings and maybe give us some sweet predictions for next week's top 8. And we're going to try to join one more game.
Alrighty, thank you for that. And yeah, we're just finishing off the last couple rounds of or the last couple of games of round 5, the final round for today. And then we'll be able to tell you the definitive top 8 that we'll be playing next week. But impressive showing from HQT, going 5-0, and taking down some big names and just showing comfort on Air and Jagro.
Yeah, I mean, they've had enough years to practice it. That's not fair. We're seeing a lot of new faces here as well, right? So a lot of people who have come up to speed on these decks, and there are a lot of differences, of course, in how you play Air, for example, compared to 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of innovations in how Air and Jagro are both being built compared to even like a year ago, 6 months ago, with these Onfridas and the shock units. But we are not seeing Air versus Jagro here. We are seeing a U.S. France versus a Britain France.
Oh, you love to see it.
For taking things in a different direction than we've seen sort of the rest of today. And it definitely looking like the American player here is in the driver's seat. Substantially higher health total, picking up U.S. research, also forcing out more draws from their opponent.
Yeah, this is really more so the kind of matchup you want to be playing US France into.
Absolutely. And just double checking the standings, this is a 2-2 game. So this is actually potentially relevant for the standings here. The winner of this game will be in a very good position.
Well, that Phony War was the best possible card to discard in the deck, I'm sure.
And let's get some names to these players. So the U.S. France on the bottom of the screen is, of course, Ephraim. We saw them on this deck once before. Obviously, that did not work out for them quite as well. And then To the Last Man is our player on the top on the Britain France. So Ephraim versus To the Last Man, both at 2-2 in the standings. And if you're To the Last Man in this situation, how do you come back into this game? And is it exclusively with Sabotage taking US research?
More or less, yeah.
I mean, is that even going to be enough?
These Cyclone divisions do pose a challenge.
The B-24D being picked up there, though.
Yeah, that's a big old guy.
We'll see what's overdrawn here. Being able to control the overdraws is so important. Black Prince. Albacore, you're probably fine to see. Black Prince, the effect might not have been incredibly relevant, but just the body by itself, losing the Havre,
That's rough.
huge issue.
Heal of Call to the Colonies, just for hand space.
I'm going up to 62.
Yeah, I
the
don't think he's
loyalty
playing it
overdrawn.
because he needed to go up to 62.
Yup. And it's looking rough. To the Last Man is quite soon going to be to the last unit in his deck by the looks of things. Not a lot left. There's an Ingenuity. But, I mean, maybe Ingenuity can get the Lancaster. He's just going to rip the Sabotage. Hits both Cyclone divisions by the looks of it. And it looks like both Cyclone divisions and the Phony War, maybe. Taking one of those Cyclone divisions just for another unit. Misses the US research.
Misses the B-24J.
But the Ultras in hand, which can block research, it does force another draw out.
Well, it only blocks the research so much against someone with 17 credits.
Picking up another 2 compromises. This is unfortunate. And this is exactly the matchup that Ephraim was looking for here. This is why there's the Cyclone divisions. This is why the deck is incredibly greedy. Is you can just go so much heavier than these slower decks. This is going much better for them than the Jagro game against I believe it was HQT. But first Cyclone hitting the board, and honestly, I wouldn't be that surprised if we see To the Last Man just surrender here. It's short of Ephraim wins the 50-50 to get out of Cyclone division, but short of Ephraim essentially losing connection.
Yeah, and even then.
Well,
that's a little extreme. You can't really use the Ultra here because it draws you.
Yeah, the issue is these the Phony War in hand, so like if there wasn't this Phony War and also the health totals were more equal, maybe. But just research is going to be able to take out some of these units, and then once the units come out onto the board to replace the units that are removed, it is just going to drop the hand size down for Phony War to force overdraws. Blenheim is probably not the card they were looking for off of Ingenuity. I mean, yeah, the issue is you have to play the B-24D. Take out this B-24J, can push Cyclone. Ultra is telegraphed. And Ephraim
Credits
plays
to
around
check and has the nukes is crazy.
17 credits. And there goes the vast majority of the units on board. and it's over. Ephraim can't play 3 of the 5 cards left in their hand, and I believe Phony War is just going to be immediately lethal here.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping for the Phony War concede play from To the Last Man.
And that is going to see Ephraim going 3-2, and we'll see if that is enough to make it into the top 8. We're just this was the final round, so the scores are being crunched on the website once they input the results. And we will see our final 8. And the top 8, which will be streamed next weekend, so don't miss it, next Saturday. But the top 8 is a different format. This was a best of 3, no bans, and you're playing against a wider variety of players. Going into the top 8, they will know their first round opponent, and it's going to be 4 decks, 1 ban, best of 5. And that's quite a bit different, obviously, in how you play and how you deck build. And we've seen some very strong results. Jagro, Air, Self-Damage, most popular decks on the day, all performed pretty well. What do you think people's 4th decks are going to be in like sort of the meta lineup? Do you think it's going to be Germany, or do you think they're going to figure out a US deck? Perhaps taking inspiration from Ephraim here.
So I do feel like it makes a lot of sense to just have like a control deck, maybe a Britain control deck, because those are so good at eating bans, although then you don't have air, so I guess that isn't too important. But it there are types of players who are just never going to bring a control deck, and that's the real, like, what are we going to see from those guys? And there could be some innovation there, a new take on Frontline, a new take on, Germany, Japan. I think we'll see a few of those sort of oddball aggro decks.
Yeah, I definitely think if you're going the more aggressive route, I think Germany is going to be the more popular pick. But we have seen USA Britain ramp with a more standard anti-aggro control shell that has been able to stand up toe for toe, at least in the previous meta, and we saw it performing very well, of course, in Spoker's hands during the World Championship. It was not that popular today, and I don't know if that was just more of players just looking to play something they're maybe a bit more comfortable on, or if there's a particular meta reason that we did not see as much ramp today. But I suspect that we might be seeing a lot more ramp next weekend as players are forced a bit further out of these comfort zones with the 4 decks. And it looks like we do have our final 8 here. I don't know if we'll be pulling it up on stream, but of course HQT is going to be our seed 1, the only player at 5-0. Then all of the 4-1 players with Noin, and I need to pull up my player reference here. Taboo, Noin, and Nanami, all going 4-1. That's going to be the next 3 players. And I mean, those are all names that we have seen before. HQT, Nanami, Taboo, and Noin 5. Of course, we've seen them all before in tournaments. And then we get down to our 4, 3, and 2 players, where we will be having Pancake, who I believe we've seen in maybe 10cc, Sai C, who we've never seen before, 2598, who we've never seen before, and just clutching it in, we will be seeing Ephraim in the top 8. Perhaps reprising that US-France list. But yeah, that is our top 8. So we see the top 4 players are sort of more tournament veterans, and then the bottom 4 players are relatively new and kind of working out interestingly, with those being the 5-0s and the 4-1s. Here we can see the final results, the full list there, with all of the names of the players who are participating here today.
And my heart goes out to the 9th and 10th position players at the 3-2, but the tiebreak's just not working out for them. I'm sure you've been there before, J-King. I've been there before. It is a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, but that's why we have tiebreakers, but it's never easy to accept. But Thankfully, it looks like we only had one player making it on the not making it with a 3-2 score. Oh no, I just haven't refreshed the page yet. It is the 2 players not making it on the 3-2. But yeah, it was a tough field. We saw some big names not making it, and we see some big names in the top 8. And what's interesting to me is that it is kind of like properly seeded, if you want to say it, in that the sort of the tournament names are all in the top half of the bracket, meaning they will not be playing each other in the first round. So we will have 4 separate sort of like more well-known name, more experienced player versus a newcomer, relatively speaking, in all 4 of our first round series. So that's going to be quite interesting. We'll see how that works out if veterancy pays out, and also just doing well in Swiss rounds. But I mean, we've seen it before where a player will qualify deeper into an event with a very impressive Swiss round result, you know, the 6-0s, the 7-0s, and then just immediately bomb out of the first round. So how do you think the difference between going from a Swiss round to a more standard single elimination bans thing, how does it change sort of the decks you build and your approach going into it?
Well, what I was going to say is that having bans, I think, benefits the veterans just a little teensy bit because there's some experience in knowing what your opponent is likely to ban from you, and then how that changes your lineup into theirs, and then how you decide your ban. I feel like that sort of mental game can be hard to get a grasp on as a new player because you only start dealing with those things once you're playing in tournaments. So if this is your first tournament, then bans can make things a little more difficult.
And with the format that we had for the Swiss round, where it's 3 decks, no bans, you can bring sort of more counter decks where you're like, well, I'll bring this deck and I'll only play it if my opponent has this type of lineup, and then you just focus on winning with the other 2 decks. But in a situation where it's 3 decks or 4 decks, 1 ban, best of 5, you have to win with every deck that you bring that isn't banned. So it's also much easier to target a weak deck. So that is going to be in the favor of the more veteran players who, you know, it could be a collection issue, but also just being more comfortable on a larger number of decks with their wealth of experience, making it, you know, harder to get them out of their comfort zone than a relative newcomer to the competitive scene. But yeah, we'll have to wait till next weekend to see how that top 8 plays out. But I'm very excited to see how these players make it. I'm very excited to see how the meta shifts of what they brought, because, you know, we see the HUT going 5-0 with sort of the decks we expected to see, but we also see some names in there into that top 8 who brought some wild things, like Ephraim, of course, we saw on their US France, but also Nanami going 4-1 with Japan Italy control. Definitely not something that I think a lot of people had on their radar going into this. So we'll see, do those players switch off their weird decks? Do they stick with it? Do other players adopt it? Do they see the spark there? But all of that will be waiting for us for next weekend. Do you have any final remarks here?
I just want to say, if any players are watching, bring Throp. Trust. That is all. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you next weekend.